Welcome to the Hyper Growth Zone podcast. This is your go-to resource for personal growth, mastering communication, and influencing and persuasion techniques that will help you unleash the full potential of yourself and others. Here is your host, Alex Morgan.
Welcome to another episode of the Hyper Growth Zone podcast. My name is Alex Morgan, and I'm a master trainer of hypnosis and NLP. And on this episode, we're going to explore inner conflict so you can understand it and you can navigate it. Because if you want to change the whole meaning of your reality and create your ideal future, then one of the things that you need to successfully and easily navigate is inner conflict. This is because I want to ask you a few questions. Have you ever felt torn between two choices and you were not really sure what you wanted to do? You couldn't really decide which path to take. Do you often hear yourself say things like, well, on one hand, I want to do this, and on the other hand, I want to do this, or sometimes I feel like this, and sometimes I feel like that. And part of the time, I know what to do, and the other part of the time, I just don't know what to do. So these are common phrases that people use. Maybe you don't use them so much. Maybe you hear people around you saying things like this, or you're around people who just don't make enough decisions, and decisions just aren't easy for them. What happened to me was about 7 years ago when I went to learn about hypnosis and NLP and all of these things. It used to take me a lot longer to make decisions. And then when I learned about inner conflict and I learned about the language that I was using and I learned how to resolve these inner conflicts, all of a sudden, I started to make decisions fast. It doesn't mean that I don't make as good of decisions. However, when you think about it, a lot of the times people who aren't making decisions, they're not deciding anything. And the problem with this is if we're not deciding things for ourselves, then you're not creating the reality that you want, because a lot of times then you're going to have influence from someone else. Someone else might be telling you what to do. And what if they even have conflict in their own life and they're really good at not necessarily deciding for themselves? However, they're really good at deciding for other people and telling other people what to do instead. So this is one reason why you probably really want to learn this, because you and I both know, if you're listening, if you're enjoying this episode so far, any of these episodes, that you really want to create a clear picture of what you want in the future. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to get rid of, dissolve, work on any inner conflicts that you have. So an inner conflict is really a struggle that you might have between opposing desires, beliefs, or values that are within yourself. Because think about it, some of the language that I used before, some people say, well, a part of me wants to do this, a part of me wants to do that. On one hand, I want to do this, and on one hand, I want to do that. So these are actually parts that are inside your nervous system. These are unconscious parts that you've created over time, and that's fine. It's not necessarily a problem, but now that you're aware of this and you're listening to this episode, you can decide that you want to get rid of inner conflicts, that you want to do something about this. So these different parts, they're going against each other. Let's say that we have one top spot in the unconscious mind, one top spot on the leaderboard. Let's say that there's 15, 20, 25, 30 different parts going for the top spot all with different desires, with different beliefs, different values. If they're all competing against each other, the odds of getting the top spot are slim. 1 out of 15, 20, 25, 30, whatever it is. Chances are you're not going to get that top spot if there's all these desires, beliefs, and values. So what if all these desires, these beliefs, these values, what if these were all good things? And what if they were all working together to get that top spot? That means that all of those things, however many, 15, 20, 25, 30, this is just an example. All of these could all get the top spot and they could all work together. I mean, how much more successful could someone be on the inside if all their values, all their beliefs, all their desires were all driving towards the same things? They were totally congruent. They felt totally whole, going after exactly what it is that they want. So there's some different things that are a cause or a source of inner conflict. Some of the things that I mentioned there. So conflicting values. A lot of times a person will, on one hand, want one thing. On the other hand, will want one thing. So they have a conflicting value. They're not congruent in their values. So what's this going to do? This might cause them to be stuck or stagnant or procrastinate. Because when you have a conflict in values, you're not necessarily motivated towards something. Even if you do work towards your goal, you're going to inch a bit towards it because something is important to you. But then when you get to a certain point, you're going to have some sort of conflict and you're not going to be sure what to do next. So conflicting values is definitely a source of inner conflict. Another one could be a fear of failure, or someone feeling like they're not good enough. It could be different beliefs that a person has. Now, there's a big difference between having an inner conflict and having a limiting belief. A limiting belief is something that you're going to believe all the time. So if you say, I'm not good enough, and you believe that all the time, then that's a limiting belief that you can work on. And to do that, you need to just ask yourself 3 questions. When did I decide this? What can I learn from this? And what do I want to do, or what do I want to feel instead? So a limiting belief is a full-time belief. You believe it all the time. Now, an inner conflict, if it's has to do with a belief of I'm not good enough, if you believe that only some of the time or part of the time, you think you're not good enough at speaking a second language. Okay, fair. However, in your career, with your family, you think you are deserving. You think you are good enough. You think you can make enough money. So it's part of the time. So you think you're not good enough only part of the time, then that's going to be an inner conflict, and you can easily work on that. So anytime you have doubts, worries, beliefs that are something part of the time, then that's going to be an inner conflict, where a limiting belief, you're going to have that thought, have that belief all the time. So that's the difference that you want to recognize here. Or it could be something like external pressures. If you feel like you're pressured all the time from people externally, like I mentioned earlier, if people end up making decisions for you and you're not making decisions, and then your life isn't going how you want, guess what? You're not taking responsibility. You don't have your personal power. You're actually giving your decisions to someone else. So if you notice this is happening to you, or if you notice this is happening to other people, then it may be because they have inner conflict. So these are some of the common sources of inner conflict. And so now we can talk about some more common ones that people have. So one of the common ones, inner conflicts, let's say amongst entrepreneurs, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, they have a really interesting inner conflict. It's quite fascinating, so I don't want to share it here. So this one is freedom versus responsibility. Because a lot of entrepreneurs, so if you are an entrepreneur, you may be able to relate to this. You wanted probably to be an entrepreneur because you wanted some level of freedom. You didn't want to work in a traditional job, have someone telling you what to do, when to show up, how much work you had to do, how many hours per week you had to work, when you can go on vacation. This isn't giving you freedom. This isn't giving you autonomy. So at some point you said, okay, I had enough of this, or I have a really good idea. I want to help people in my way. I'm going to start my own business. I want to be an entrepreneur. You wanted that freedom. So now that you have all the freedom, some people, some entrepreneurs, they find themselves working so hard that it doesn't feel like they have so much freedom. They're working even more. And they don't even end up necessarily taking the vacations or receiving all the benefits that they wanted from that freedom as an entrepreneur because they're caught up in all the responsibilities. After a certain point, they think, I don't have freedom. I actually have so much responsibility. However, if you think about it, there is no such thing as freedom without responsibility. Because if you don't take responsibility essentially means that you're not pointing the finger outside at someone else. You're not blaming anyone if you're taking responsibility. You're in control of how you feel. No one is causing you to feel a certain emotion. So if you're actually taking responsibility in this way, it's one of the first things to do to achieve success, then you don't have a problem with freedom or responsibility, because responsibility really is the ability to respond. So there is no such thing as freedom without responsibility, because this entrepreneur gave themselves this ability to respond. They actually do have freedom. What they need to do is they need to realize this is how you actually resolve inner conflicts. What they need to do is they need to realize that on the one hand, they have freedom. On the other hand, they have responsibility. And if they were to ask themselves certain questions about this, let's say you start with freedom. For what purpose do you want freedom? Or what's the highest positive intention of freedom? And you're going to get a series of words, and you're going to ask yourself that question several times. And eventually you're going to get to a really abstract word where you don't really need to go to a higher chunked up level anymore. And then you can stop. And then you can ask yourself the same thing about responsibility. For what purpose responsibility? Or what is the highest positive intention of responsibility? And then you'll realize that you'll get to the same word, most likely. And so you'll realize that the freedom, the responsibility, the inner conflict that you thought that you had, those two things actually want the same thing. They want the same purpose. They want the same highest positive intention. So freedom and responsibility, they're actually working towards the same thing. So this is how you can actually resolve. You take the conflict. The first thing you need to do, though, is you need to properly identify the conflict. So in this case, the example was freedom and responsibility. Now, the idea here is to have a big enough conflict, not something so small, because freedom and responsibility, these are pretty abstract concepts on their own, meaning they're the big picture. So if you can integrate freedom and responsibility on this inner conflict, it might integrate all the other small things that you were conflicted about within your career, your professional setting, maybe the relationships within that, or whatever. However, if you had a conflict about, let's say, I'm an entrepreneur, I love having the freedom, so I have a few different cars because I've made enough money and I like to treat myself and reward myself to cars. And your conflict was, I don't know which car to drive to the office. Is this really a problem? If you were to think about this, you as a person listening to this, if you thought about this, is this really a problem for people? Okay, maybe it is. However, how is that a problem to this person? And so it may end up where the person says, I don't think I can have what I want. And maybe they only believe that part of the time. And this is a much bigger conflict. I don't think I can get what I want. That's a much bigger conflict than what car am I going to drive to the office. So when you integrate, I don't think I can have what I want versus I know I can have what I want, or I deserve to have what I want, whatever the opposite of that is, that's the thing. You want to have kind of two opposite sides of the coin here to integrate these things. Then you're going to integrate the cars. They're going to be able to make all those decisions. So that's the idea. You want to have a big enough problem to where once you see that they both have the same purpose, the same highest intention, guess what? It's going to integrate all those small things, and then you're going to be able to make all the decisions. You're not going to have inner conflict. You're not going to have a values conflict of motivation. You're going to have more motivation towards your goal. The beliefs, you're going to feel better about the beliefs. You're going to have more positive beliefs, positive desires. All of these different things are going to be much, much better for you. So this is something that I work with clients all the time, especially busy professionals and things like this. The freedom responsibility is a good example. A lot of times, though, it is what I mentioned earlier. It's a limiting belief that people have part of the time. So they feel really good about something in their life, and then they also feel not good enough about another part of their life, possibly, and they have some sort of conflict in this way. So if you're not making the decisions that you want to make, then go ahead and reach out. All my information will be in the description of the episode, because I'm telling you, when you start to integrate all these things, we already have enough parts. We're already fragmented enough. We believe that all procedures should increase wholeness, should increase choice. So when you're able to integrate the parts in your unconscious mind, and you're able to be motivated by the same things and know what motivates you, don't you think that it would be easier for you to have success? And this is why you want to put effort in your mind, because resolving an inner conflict, it's all about just doing it with the unconscious mind. All you really need to do is identify the problem, show these different parts, these things that are conflicted, that they actually have the same highest purpose and intention, and they integrate together. And then they're working together. They're all trying to get to that top spot. However, they're doing it together. It's like watching a team that no one is on the same page and no one's willing to work together. However, if you have a team that's willing to work together, what are they going to do? They're going to achieve everything so much more easy and effortless. And usually the team that has a bit of history and more chemistry, that's the team that's going to succeed. However, what do? They put in effort and they have an attitude that this is what they want to do. So if you put effort in your mind and just do this simple thing, it doesn't take a lot of effort. That's the wonderful thing. You can resolve these conflicts rather quickly, because I know how to resolve them rather quickly for myself and working with other people over the many years. So once you do that, you don't have to put so much effort in the physical, because you're going to make these decisions easily and effortlessly because you're unconsciously aligned towards what you want. So things that seem like it was difficult in the past are now going to seem easy. Things that cause you to be stuck and stagnant are going to seem effortless. All the times that you made progress towards your goals, and then it felt like you had to backtrack because you started focusing on things that you didn't want, or you felt conflicted, and you felt like you maybe didn't deserve to achieve those goals. That's going to now become automatic and natural for you if you really focus on resolving your inner conflicts. So that's what you want to consider, because a lot of the things, we're not necessarily limited by the things that we want to do and cannot do. We're actually limited by the things that we haven't considered yet. So maybe you haven't considered resolving inner conflict. So maybe now is the time, because you can. You know what to do, don't you? So it's up to you. I'll leave it up to you what you want to do. However, if you do want help with this, go ahead and reach out. Even if you just want to chat about it and discuss it some more, go ahead and reach out. All my information will be in the description of the episode. Thanks so much for listening. I really do appreciate everyone who tunes into each of these episodes. All the people who have been listening lately, I really appreciate it. All the people who are offering different suggestions and recommendations for episodes. It really helps me to keep making these, because I do love talking about these things. So wherever you are listening, go ahead and leave a review, letting me know what you think of the podcast. And thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you on the next episode.